The largest for-profit thrift company in North America sells the average item in its stores for about $5. It buys the goods by weight, and last year the merchandise inside those stores cost it roughly 68 cents a pound. It ran that trade across 1 billion pounds of other people's belongings and turned it into $1.7 billion of sales. So the margin is enormous, the supply is effectively infinite, and the customers queue up voluntarily. On paper, this is the easiest business in retail. It is not. And the reason is a single number that nobody outside the industry has ever heard of, which the company reports to its investors, and which explains the price of every object you have ever picked up off a thrift rack. Because a thrift store does not really sell clothes, it sells a guess, thousands of them a day, made in seconds, by people who will never see most of those objects again. Hold on to that word, because the whole video ends up there. And there is something happening to that guess right now that is going to change what these stores feel like to walk into. One thing from you first. What is the best thing you have ever found in a thrift store, and what did you pay for it? I want the item and the price. Because somewhere in this comment section is a person who bought a $200 jacket for $6 and has been telling that story at parties for a decade. Put it below. And if you like these pulled apart this way, the like and subscribe buttons are genuinely the whole reason these keep getting made. Right, start at the back door because that is where the actual business is. A normal retailer knows everything about its inventory before it arrives. 40 identical shirts turn up with a purchase order, a wholesale cost, a size run, a barcode, and a retail price that was decided in a spreadsheet months earlier. The hardest question that shipment will ever ask is where to put it. A thrift store opens a bin bag. Inside is 6 ordinary shirts, a coat, a chipped mug, a handbag that looks expensive and is not, and a belt that looks ordinary and might be worth more than everything else in the bag combined. None of it has a cost. None of it has a recommended price. Most of it will appear exactly once and never again. So every single object entering that building arrives with the same question attached, and the question has to be answered before the next lorry backs up. What is this worth? And here is the part people miss. Answering that question is not free. It is, in fact, the most expensive thing the company does. Industry estimates put sorting and processing at somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes per item, depending on the category. Clothing sits at the fast end. Housewares and electronics take longer, because somebody has to establish whether the thing still works. Simple tagging runs 30 to 60 seconds. Anything that needs researching, a collectible or a piece of equipment, runs 3 to 5 minutes on its own. An experienced pricer can move somewhere in the region of 100 to 150 straightforward items an hour, and once you add transport, storage and handling, the all-in processing cost of a donated item lands somewhere around 50 cents to $2. Now put that against an average selling price of $5. Read those two numbers next to each other, because they are the entire business. On a $5 item, the cost of deciding it is worth $5 can be a third of the price. The goods were free, the verdict was not. And that creates a trap that has no clean solution. Say an employee spends 10 minutes researching a jacket and establishes that it should be $20 rather than $8. Excellent work. $12 of value recovered. Except 10 minutes of that employee's time, fully loaded, may have cost more than the $12 it found. The store just became more accurate and less profitable in the same motion. So reverse it. The employee glances at the jacket, tags it at 8, and moves on. Somebody who knows exactly what it is buys it in the first hour and resells it online for $200. The store saved the 10 minutes. It gave away the difference. There is no version of this where you win both. Speed and accuracy are in direct opposition on every object all day. And the answer is not to be right. The answer is to be roughly right, extremely fast, several thousand times before closing. Which brings us to the number I mentioned at the start, and it is the one that runs everything. The company reports a metric to its investors called sales yield, and underneath it sits the measure that actually matters. Items sold per pound processed, not revenue per store, not margin per garment. How much sellable merchandise comes out of every pound of raw donated weight that goes in? Sit with what that means. The unit of input is weight, the unit of output is decisions, and the ratio between them is the business. When that yield fell recently, the company told investors plainly why. Fewer items were being sold per pound processed. Higher prices on the items that did sell partly covered it. That is the whole model exposed in one sentence. It does not matter how much stuff comes in the door. It matters how much of it survives contact with a human being's attention. And the cost of that attention is rising in an obvious way. That company's cost of merchandise sold reached around $670 million last year, up about 8%, and it named higher personnel costs as a driver. It employs roughly 24,000 people across 367 stores. That workforce is not primarily standing behind tills, it is standing behind the wall, opening bags. So a thrift chain is not a shop with a stockroom. It is an appraisal operation with a shop attached to the front of it, so the appraisals have somewhere to go. And before we go further, it is worth understanding where that weight actually comes from, because the back door is not a charitable accident. It is procurement, and it is paid for. The company sources its goods by buying them from nonprofit partners, either directly or through donation centers attached to its own stores. And over the last 5 years, it has paid those partners in the region of $534 million for secondhand clothing and household goods. So the supply is not free at all. It arrives at a negotiated rate per pound, which is the 68 cents. And the entire question that follows is how much sellable merchandise a company can extract from that pound before the labor cost of extracting it exceeds what the merchandise is worth. Now, this is where it would be easy to hand you a villain, and the honest version is far more interesting. The obvious accusation is that these places are careless, that they underprice good things because they cannot be bothered to look, and overprice ordinary things out of greed, and that a competent operator would simply fix it. That is wrong, and it is wrong in a way that reveals what these stores are actually selling. Walk into a normal clothing shop today and come back tomorrow. The black shirt is still there, the same jeans in 4 sizes. That consistency is the entire point, because a customer who wants a specific object needs to be able to find it. A thrift store is the opposite, deliberately. The jacket you are holding may be the only one that store receives this year. There is no warehouse with 50 more, and that means the customer is not walking in to buy a product. They are walking in to find out what turned up. That experience has a name inside the industry, and it is in the filings, the treasure hunt. It is described in the annual report as the shopping environment the company offers. Now think about what a treasure hunt requires. It requires treasure. And treasure, in this context, is precisely an item that is priced below what it is worth. If every object in the building were priced correctly to the last cent, there would be no discovery, no story, no $6 jacket, and no reason to keep coming back and checking. Which means the mistakes are not a defect in the model. Some quantity of mistake is the marketing budget. And the same logic applies to the people everybody in the comments blames. The resellers who stand at the racks with phones, scanning labels, buying the underpriced things and listing them online. It is easy to call that parasitic. Look at their actual economics though. A reseller spends something like 12 to 20 minutes sourcing an item, 10 minutes photographing and listing it, and 8 minutes packing and shipping it. At $15 an hour, that is around $7.50 of labor per item, before platform fees of roughly 13% in postage. Put real numbers on one of those transactions and the shape of it becomes obvious. A vintage denim jacket picked up for $12 at a half-price day sells online for $68. Platform fees take just over $9. Shipping materials take $2. Cleaning takes another $150, and the seller's own time, valued honestly, takes about $7. Total cost? A little over $31 against $68 of revenue. It is a good margin, and it is a good margin precisely because 30 minutes of somebody's labor went into an object that the store had already worked out it could not justify spending 10 minutes on. They are not stealing value. They are performing the exact labor the store decided was too expensive to perform and being paid the difference for doing it. The store made a rational decision not to spend 10 minutes. Somebody else spends 30. The gap between those two numbers is their entire income. The store and the reseller are not enemies. They are two ends of the same calculation about whose time is worth what. Which brings us to the thing that is happening right now, and it is the reason this video exists. The guess is being automated. That same company has just launched a proprietary pricing platform built with an analytics firm for its men's and women's apparel. The stated purpose is to reduce manual inputs and bring more consistency and precision to pricing decisions across the assortment. The company says stores using it delivered higher unit sell-through, larger baskets, and stronger sales yields. Read the reasoning in that announcement because it is unusually candid. The company points out that processing more than £1 billion a year has given it enormous insight into the difficulty of evaluating and pricing unique secondhand items. In other words, it has spent decades accumulating the one asset that matters here, which is not clothing and is not real estate. It is a record of what millions of guesses were worth after the fact. That is the thing being productized, not the jacket, the judgment about the jacket. And it works in the direction the company wants. Higher sell-through means fewer items dying on the rack. Stronger yield means more sellable merchandise per pound. Every one of those metrics improves when the guessing gets better. Now hold that next to the treasure hunt, because the two are in tension and everybody involved knows it. A pricing engine trained on years of outcomes will not tag a $200 jacket at $8. That is the entire purpose of building one. Which means the better this technology gets, the fewer of those jackets exist, and the fewer of those jackets exist, the less reason there is to walk in on a Tuesday and check. The store improves its yield and, in the same movement, spends down the thing that brought the customer through the door. That is not a prediction of collapse. Convenience, price, and volume are real reasons to shop, and most people in those aisles are buying a jumper because it is $5, not hunting a rarity. But the romance of the format, the reason people make videos about hauls and tell jacket stories at parties, is a direct product of imperfect information. And imperfect information is the specific thing being engineered out. There is one more pressure on that yield, and it arrives through the same door as everything else. More donated volume does not automatically mean more recoverable value, because the labor required to inspect a worthless garment is almost identical to the labor required to inspect a good one, and you cannot tell which you are holding until somebody has already picked it up. A household that donates 5 well-made coats has handed over 5 objects that will each survive another owner. A household that donates 50 stretched, stained, cheaply constructed pieces has handed over 10 times the volume, a fraction of the value, and 50 separate moments of somebody's paid attention. That is why a rising mountain of unwanted clothing can look like abundant free supply on the way in and behave like an expensive sorting problem on the way out. So how do thrift stores actually make money? Not by selling clothes cheaply. The clothes are close to free by weight and the price is only $5 anyway. There are 3 layers stacked here and only one of them is the shop. There is the retail layer, where a single object is matched to a single customer at an individually assigned price, and which produces the most revenue per item and consumes the most labor to do it. There is the correction layer underneath, markdowns and outlets and bulk channels, where an object that failed at retail loses its identity and gets sold as a category rather than a thing, recovering less value but demanding almost no judgment. And underneath both of those sits the wholesale layer, where what is left stops being merchandise entirely and goes back to being weight. Every rung down that ladder recovers less money and costs less thought. And the skill that decides how much a company earns is not knowing what things are worth. It is knowing, in about 4 seconds, which objects deserve to be thought about at all. That is the product, not the inventory, the triage. Which is why the bags in your boot were never really a donation of clothing. You were handing over a stack of unanswered questions, and the value in them was never the fabric. It was the fact that answering those questions yourself, photographing and listing and posting 30 separate objects, would have cost you more weekends than the money was worth. You did not give away a lamp. You gave away the work of finding out what the lamp was worth. And the business that took it from you has just built a machine, so it never has to do that work again either. If you enjoyed pulling this one apart, a like and a subscribe helps this channel more than you would think. And if you want the same skill with real money riding on it, the pawn shop video is the natural next one, because a pawnbroker makes exactly this judgment in about 30 seconds. Except when he gets it wrong, he is the one who paid for the mistake. Or work through the money and business playlist on the channel. See you in the next one.